For this quick demo, I'm going to be tackling this cactus here. Not all plants that we deal with are purely just like leaves and petals and stems. Some of them have considerably more volume to them, and some of them actually will start to meld together different concepts. Like you might have leaves that have considerably more thickness and form to them. Like I know succulent plants tend to have leaves that are like, you might end up with something like this, but it's going to have some more thickness to it, like a nice healthy rounded edge there instead of just the standard flat business where you could actually divide out another kind of plane if you wanted. So cactuses, well, this cactus at least, is an interesting example to tackle because you've got these somewhat flat forms here with a good deal of thickness to the point that they're not really leaves anymore. They are similar in some ways, but they're really becoming more standalone forms. Not standalone forms, that's not really what I meant. Forms that no longer are quite as directional as leaves, but rather they stand really solidly on their own. So we're going to look at, there's really just three major forms here. We've got this base, and then these two ears, really. I think, at least where I got the reference, they referred to it as a bunny ears cactus. I'm not really sure if that's the technical term, but we'll have to see. So when I'm drawing this, the first thing that I want to do is I've definitely noticed that this one here is the base. So I'm going to go ahead and try and capture it. I'm not just going to draw like that, because that's a trajectory that changes very harshly all of a sudden. Instead, I'm going to be drawing the entire form that I perceive as existing, dipping all the way down to here. And I'm going to try and capture that. I always want to draw my forms to completion all the way around, and I want to try and maintain a consistent trajectory as much as possible. So here, it's basically an organic form. Obviously, this currently looks very flat, so I know that I need to give it some contour information to be able to understand it better myself. And one helpful place to do that is exactly where I know it's kind of covered up, where it actually sprouts from this bucket of rocks and soil or whatever else is there. So I can use that kind of border as a great way to kind of reinforce what I already know to be the kind of profile of this form. So I know here that my contour line would hook around the way that it does here because of that thickness. It's not just going to be a standard ellipse. It's not going to be like a standard rounded form. It's actually got a very distinct kind of thick face here that I can actually divide out like this. But it's a little more rounded than that. So I've opted for going for a contour curve that just has a little bit more character to it. Then I've got these other two forms. So this one in particular, I noticed that it's got a kind of it tucks in a little bit, which is slightly irregular. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by drawing a form that kind of goes a little bit wide, and then I'm going to tuck it in myself. It's a little bit of a risky approach, because when you're just tucking in something very simply like that, you have to be careful to adhere as much as you can to the original construction, rather than treating it like just by original construction, I mean the original kind of where I went wide. I'll show you. So here's my original construction, and what I want to do is, because I've got that kind of tucking in there, I want to tuck it in like this. Now, I'm very careful to kind of start from the original construction line there, tuck in as I want, and then follow back along my original construction. I want to abide by it and respect that original construction as much as I can, even though I'm not really I'm kind of ignoring this chunk here. It's a calculated move, and it can be risky. When you just ignore your construction like that, you can definitely throw off the solidity of your form if you're not careful in doing it. So that's why we are being very careful to respect that construction wherever possible. And then, of course, there's this last form, which despite being blocked on this side, I'm going to draw the entirety of it. Maybe it comes up to about here. And so as far as the main forms, we've pretty much got them down now. Now we can look into doing similar deals with fleshing out this the thickness of this piece and this one. So just like I did here with this contour curve, we do the same deal here. Maybe I'll apply it up here. Maybe another one up here just for the sake of maintaining that solidity. Now, what we're left with really is just 3 forms and quite a few little bobs here. I don't really know what they are. I haven't studied cacti that much. But once I'm confident in the solidity here, I think I might actually want to just explore a little bit of the rocks down here. I'm not terribly concerned with their actual construction because they are not my focus. So I'm not going to be constructing them too carefully. I just want to make sure that I'm not scribbling. I want to draw everything, every mark that I put down in every form with more intent. Scribbling is essentially trying to draw things sloppily and trying to do the work without actually thinking about it, and that's why usually it turns out poorly. Usually when I put in little pebbles and stuff like this, I will kind of add smaller ones as they move away from my real focus. So it's kind of like a gradient of density. I'm not going to be drawing the actual pot that it's all inside because that's more work than I really want to do right now. So now we've got these little knobs or whatever the hell they are. They look like little pom-poms, to be quite honest. The beauty of having a higher resolution image is that you can actually take a look, but it's only goes so far. So from what I can see, you've got these balls and you've got little spines coming out of them. So I'm going to try and at least convey the essence of what these are on my construction. So I want to pay special attention to how they are arranged on the form. So notice how they are kind of alternating a little bit. They're pretty regularly spaced out, which is kind of strange for an organic form. So we'll keep an eye, keep looking at your reference image. Don't place these things blind. Try and refer to the forms that actually exist in your image. If you slip up, make a little mistake here and there, it's not the end of the world. But in general, you do want to try and match up. I'm obviously being a little bit sloppy in terms of my observation here. Just because there's a lot less space, I think this actually goes quite a bit taller than I gave it here. But as I've mentioned elsewhere, I'm not necessarily trying to reproduce the identical cactus in this photograph. I'm not reproducing the photo by any means. I'm really just using it as something to construct. Of course, this one has quite a bit more, and I'm not going to be drawing quite that density because I have better things to do with my day. Always be aware of how the texture and how the elements on your objects impact the silhouette, because that silhouette is the first thing that the viewer sees, and it is extremely important. There is a lot more that I could be doing with these. They're not just little balls. They've got these little spines and stuff. I'm not sure if it's necessarily that educational to see me drawing all the little spines on them. I'll do a few of them though. And I will also be mindful of these little cast shadows. Kind of let them stand out a little bit. And of course, same goes for this side. I want to, or not this side, these major forms. I want to make sure that my line weights kind of are clean and convey what I'm after. There is some interesting stuff going on up at the top here where it seems to have caved in a little bit. Maybe I'll try and capture that a little bit. Where I can see like this thing has been cut open, or at least it looks like it has. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So when you're not entirely sure of what's going on, you kind of have the desire sometimes to just scribble in there and fake it. I urge you never to scribble, never to be random. Even if you're putting in marks that don't mean anything, at least be intentional in what kind of marks you're putting down. You'll notice that even though I'm very much simplifying these things into basically little balls, it's not the same as going cartoony. When you go cartoony, you're no longer really thinking about how they sit on the form, what kind of like how they sit in space really, or how they relate to each other. You just end up kind of going like this. This is cartoony, where you're not being intentional, you're not thinking about 3D space, you're not constructing your elements. You are just kind of, putting down whatever. Here, I'm actually considering how they sit on the form, what kind of space they take up, and what kind of shadows they cast, just so that I can continue to make them feel believable. That's really the key word here. You want things to be believable. You could absolutely believe that there was a cactus with these little bumps and knobs on them, even though that's not exactly what these are. They are definitely a little bit fuzzier than I'm giving them credit for, but my construction here does feel believable. So if I was creating a plant for some, prop design or whatever, I'd be able to look at this object here and create a completely believable cactus from this reference. And that's because everything is being constructed. Anyway, I think I'm gonna call it quits there. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to suggest with this cactus. I mean, you could go in all kinds of ways. You could try and capture the fuzziness of this. I don't know if felt tip studies are really the way to do it though. So really, I want you focusing more on the overall forms. And when you are adding these kinds of smaller elements, continue to think about how they exist in space and how the forms actually sit on your objects. Don't just get too caught up on the actual minute detail of making it look fuzzy. That's a very important challenge to face, but it's not a challenge to face right now when you're focusing on form.